Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with,
Violet Gray, comedian and forever GM.
and today we're going to talk about Lost Omens Travel Guide. It's a very interesting 128-page book. Now, I'm kind of concerned that a lot of the fans of Pathfinder or fans of role-playing games in general might kind of ignore this book because, again, it doesn't come with a lot of player options like the other ones. Hardly any magic items. It has maybe one spell, a ritual, a couple of backgrounds, but this doesn't have any of that. It's all about lore. It's not even historical lore. It's all about cultural lore. Violet, what are your impressions about this book?
I definitely think that, well, you know how some role players lean more toward crunch and the tactical aspect of tabletop RPGs, and other people lean more toward the role playing aspect. I definitely think that this book is more favored toward people who like the role playing aspect, people who want to flesh out their characters, or in particular, GMs who want to add a little bit to the world and flesh it out a little bit. Like you said, there's not a lot of crunch in this particular thing. There are a couple things that I found interesting in it, but yeah, it does lean more toward the role play aspect. I think this book does.
I know when I'm playing a Pathfinder game, when I'm running a Pathfinder game, there's always these instances, these questions that players bring up about certain types of shops, or if I'm in a new area, what is everyone dressed up like? Especially Absalom. Absalom is supposed to be a hub of lots of different cultures and backgrounds. But sometimes when a group of players jump from one district to another, sometimes have to like kind of think real fast, think about, okay, what is this area like that they're in now?
Mhm.
What is the architecture like? What's everyone dressed up like? What are they selling there? And then I have to either homebrew something on this at the moment, and hopefully I got it right according to the lore we have. It could be something so even like card games, which again I'm glad they have something here about it because sometimes situations just happen.
Mhm.
Um, but there are a lot of things I really like about this book that I think helps me kind of flesh out Golarion even more so. Definitely, definitely the crimes and punishment chart.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
If you have those type of players, that's a
Yeah,
really good
yeah.
chart to have because
You'll
some
find your
scenario,
Yeah,
yes.
you'll find yourself referring to that chart a lot.
But even little things like a pet shop. I actually had a scenario maybe a few months ago where a character wanted to have a pet and
Mhm.
say, okay, what's the pet shops like in Absalom? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't imagine if they're selling just cats and dogs. There's probably some very interesting, unique, or different animals there. But just trying to conjure it on the spot is tricky. But in this book, now there's some information so that you have an idea what kind of animals or they sell there.
Mhm.
What is a pet shop like in a world full of magic?
Yeah, they fleshed out some things like popular fauna, but also popular flora. Like, I think one of them is Absalomian grapes or something like that. Different indigenous types of food to different countries. And they talked about things like the different kinds of architecture, like Thrunic architecture, which is popular in Cheliax, which is named after, of course, the ruling family of Cheliax, which is the Thrun family, um, and Shelenite architecture, which patterns itself after the temples of Shelen, the goddess of beauty. Uh, yeah, okay. Can I talk about what really stood out to me about
Oh,
this
please,
book?
please.
Okay, I'm going through the book, and I had to stop and I was like, what? They have recipes in this book that are real. So these are things, they had recipes that are indigenous to certain places, according to this book, but they have the recipes that you can actually try in real life. This is all
Hmm.
stuff you can get at the grocery store, and it tells you how to uh, how to bake these things and how to mix them. These are like legit actual recipes that you can try of these Pathfinder dishes. They do that with drinks too, like cocktails and stuff. I mean, I'm like not a huge drinker, but they're there. That's actual there for stuff to try. And I was like, this gives an almost three-dimensional quality to the book because it's like, whoa, like this is stuff that I can do for real.
Mm.
You know, that was one of the things that stood out to me. And like you mentioned, the card game. Uh, so, for example, there's a card game in this book called Golem, and it's basically a lot like poker, except there's also like a dummy hand that you have to beat called the Golem because it's just there, it's not being controlled by anything. It's not it's just a dummy hand that you have to beat.
Mm.
And so I was like, wow, they have rules for an actual game in there as well. And I really thought that was a cool aspect of the book.
I'm surprised that Paizo hasn't put out a Golem card deck.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that way you can, because I think Wizard of the Coast, they have card games that you can kind of play
Hmm.
sometimes even before the game starts in case you're waiting for your players to show up.
Hmm.
Um, so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. Could that be something? Because that seems like Golem, the card game, is something that's very important in certain parts of Absalom.
Hmm.
So I would love to. It'd be great to have some sort of a prop to show players. But yeah, this book has a lot of really cool things that um, I wouldn't call them adventure seeds, but just like ideas that you can kind of that game masters can kind of create adventures around. Like there's a section about festivals, and
Yes. Hmm.
the first two they talked about was okay. It was interesting stuff. I think the reason why I didn't grab me so much because they're very similar to real world
Hmm.
festivals.
Right, right.
But not all birth. I mean, maybe
Yeah, Allbirth. That's the one to Lamash to.
yeah,
Yeah, uh-huh.
yeah. I mean, you could sort of compare that to Halloween, but some of the activities they
Yeah.
do is like, whoa, okay, yeah. But I think that would be a fun scenario to just kind of, bring players to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of interesting cultural things that can be the start of adventure arcs. So, for example, one of the things they said that was one cultural aspect of goblins is there's this goblin superstition that says if a goblin hears a rule and they say they don't like it 3 times in a row, then that rule no longer applies to them. And it says that many a goblin has gotten in trouble in this way because and I thought that was an interesting way to start a plot arc.
Mm,
There's a rule, a certain goblin didn't follow it, and now they're in trouble and they need help, as an example.
mm. So yeah, this book has a lot of different all sorts of things. Currency, which it to me that's probably maybe the driest part of the book, but that's because I'm not into business at all. I wish I
Right,
was.
right.
I would be in a very different place in my life right now.
Hmm.
Um, but that has some really good information about currency and how it works in different areas and what the symbols mean on coins.
Hmm.
Um, I love it's a small thing, but I love that there's different clocks.
Yes, yes. Since this book is about travel, there is some focus on the different concepts of time. So, for example, there's the standard clock, and then there's this natural clock that's basically a vine that takes 24 hours to creep from the bottom of the wall to the top of the wall. And so, this one culture puts notches
Mm,
at the certain points in the wall. So when the vine reaches here, you know it's 12 o'clock, as an example. And I thought it was interesting where they took concepts like time and travel and holidays and festivals and they reinterpreted them over and over again through different cultures. And so I thought that was pretty cool.
yeah, and they have I mean, there's a lot of sections here, but the famous structures I thought was really cool.
Mhm.
That's probably the closest thing they may have here for adventure seeds. If you want to have something your characters want to investigate. I love the section about trade routes. Now I know I kind of mentioned that I'm not a fan of the business arts
Hmm.
per se. Um, but trade routes are interesting to me because I need to know where stuff is coming from. So Absalom, for example,
Hmm.
is a city. Okay, great. Where's stuff coming from exactly? I've always wondered because like New York City, for example, we got stuff coming in from either airports or from the sea or
Hmm.
from trucks coming into the city. And I was curious, like, okay, Absalom is a thriving city. Where is all the resources coming from? So
Right.
seeing trade routes is kind of cool, just because it could lead to interesting adventures. Something with the whole
Yeah, absolutely.
trade in some way. Like we saw recently in the last few years, where the shipping issues happening around the country because of
Oh,
one ship
absolutely. Yeah.
that ship that got caught in one of the
Hmm.
canals. So and that just
Right, right.
pelting up. So imagine something like that in Absalom. How would a city react to that? So I think that would be
Yeah,
kind of cool.
yeah, absolutely. One example that comes to mind is that in the country of Andoran, for example, you have the Villainous Lumber Consortium, and they are basically a lumber cartel that supplies much of the inner sea region's lumber. So there's a possible stop there. So, for example, me being a GM, what if someone tried to make competition for the lumber consortium and they needed protection because the lumber consortium is basically the wood mafia,
Hmm.
and so you have to escort their trade routes, and then the real plot happens while you're out there. That's just off the top of my head, but as an example, yeah, so I thought that was interesting either, because my players tend to travel a lot as well.
Hmm. And it's not very heavy with NPCs, meaning that it's not heavy, meaning like it doesn't have like stats upon stats.
Right, right.
But they do introduce certain characters, like if you're interested in the art scene, they let you know like who's big and who's, what's big right now and what type of art's big over there.
Hmm.
Um, there's a really cool like a two-page spread of all the bounty people that are hunted down by bounty hunters and people that are
Hmm.
wanted by the law enforcement there. I thought that was
Hmm.
really nice.
And
But
apparently, people who are also wanted by the bad guys.
which really, yeah, actually one of the wanted posters was someone that's a revolutionary, and
Right. Hmm.
so I thought that was a really good way of changing things up a little bit.
One thing that I thought was very interesting is that they added the main sporting event of the inner sea region. It is a game called Basilisk, which is kind of like a cross between football and lacrosse. Um, and different nations had different Basilisk teams, and they had some of the Basilisk players. And so you have, it's like a football. It's actually like a cross between a brutal football and Quidditch, because you have to score into a net and you have these scoop like things to pick up the ball, and you have different positions. And it goes into who some of the Basilisks players are and some of the rivalries. Uh, so yeah, I thought it was interesting that they actually talked about like sporting events and things that make culture culture. Like you said, they talked about the artists, they talked about the sporting events, and yeah, I did enjoy that part as well.
Now, I just want to talk about a very small like criticism about the book is
Mm-hmm.
that anyone that picks it up has to kind of know the areas and Golarion sort of well. Like for
Mm-hmm.
example, that one of the festivals, Merrymead, deals with Caden. And if you don't know where that is off the top of your head, you may have to like stop, like, okay, where is this, and grab some other books or Google
Mm-hmm.
online and find out what they are. Sometimes they'll mention Arcadia. I
Right,
think I think it would have helped a little bit if this was centered just on the inner sea region, you
right,
know.
right.
But I'm not complaining. It's some great information there, and I think a lot of this I could use for different game systems as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that they continue with the travel guide by maybe focusing on more different regions, because I think
Right, right.
that would help me out,
Mm-hmm.
especially if I want to focus on a certain part of the world specifically.
Yes, I did find, to your point, I did find myself kind of having to cross-reference sometimes, because there were a lot of mentions of Thessalonia and Varissia, and I believe those are places that used to exist. And I had to do like a quick reference. I was like, wait, what is Thessalonia again? What is Varissia again? So I will say that there are some places in the book that assume you know some of the other Pathfinder lore going in.
Yeah, but it's not heavy enough so that you feel like lost. Like
No,
you know.
no, absolutely. I'm definitely going to try some of those recipes.
Yeah. And just one tiny also one little quibble. They have some great sections here about fashion and what people are wearing.
Mhm.
And I wish there was like a price chart with it in some way.
Yeah, yeah.
Just so I know, like, if, all right, is this outfit a little more expensive than the other? I was just curious, but maybe that then again, maybe they don't want players or game masters to be so burdened with that much
Mhm.
knowledge about certain things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so if you're for those out there that are looking or asking about, is there any options whatsoever? Well, again, there's 8 astrological backgrounds that you can have.
Mhm.
There is a ritual 2 spell called Lucky Month, which is I thought was pretty nice. If you're looking for something like the advantage mechanic from D&D, you want to find a way to put it in here. The ritual 2 the ritual 2 spell could help make that happen in some way,
Mhm.
limit wise. And then there's rare events, which I thought
Mhm.
was interesting. So if if you ever want to do a scenario where it's raining blood,
No, yeah. Yeah, it said, well, once every, I think, 37 years,
Hmm.
in a specific, I forget which country. Yeah, they say it rains like a red blood-like substance. It might actually be blood. But yeah, that stood out to me too.
Yeah,
Yeah, something to add a bit of flavor, or an event that happened then. And so,
yeah. If you want to add an interesting scenario to your games, um, but yeah. So I think in conclusion, I think this is a great book to have, especially if you're not really into the adventure paths that Paizo has out. I know you mentioned you homebrew a lot, and I do too. And even though sometimes I combine adventure paths with homebrew,
mhm.
but again, I get stuck on certain details, and this really helps me helps me with that issue at times. Now I have a resource I could look into if there's a question about what clothing is like. I think this is a great book to have, and I really hope people don't overlook it again because it doesn't have a lot of player options.
Mhm.
But I think if you really want to flesh out your game, this is definitely the book to have.
Yes, this is I believe, this is the odds and ends that can make your narrative complete. For the crunch, you have the core rulebook and the player's guide. And for, let's see, there's a Lost Omens guide to basically, here it is. The Lost Omens World Guide gives you a good overview of everything. Lost Omens World Guide gives you an overview. And I think once you sort of zero in, if you zoom in past the individual countries into the specifics, I think that is where the Lost Omens travel guide comes in, uh, to get into the real specifics, like the festivals and the holidays. And some of it is very intuitive. For example, I read the Pathfinder, the Golarion days of the week. They're Moon Day, Toil Day, Wheel Day, Oath Day, Fire Day, Star Day, Sunday.
Hmm.
And I thought that that was pretty cool. It was easy. A lot of the stuff is easy to remember, and it'll help your players feel like they're in the world. I think a lot of this book does.
Hmm. Yeah, I love like the details too, like living in an urban environment and living in a rural environment,
Mm-hmm.
and and it talks about like if you're in a hot region that you want your floors that the houses will be the floors of those houses will be low purposely to keep it cool and just little things
Mhm.
like that. I was like, oh, I think they've done their research when it
Yeah,
comes to
yeah.
housing and how it works in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that, like, again, this is very culture, this is very feel heavy. This book, I feel like it's meant to make your setting feel complete with the minute details
Hmm.
that a lot of times we don't really think about, but we subconsciously appreciate when they're there, because it helps the scene feel complete. And I think that is the itch that this particular book scratches.
Hmm. Indeed. So everyone, again, this is the Lost Omens Travel Guide. It's out on most role-playing game stores. It's out on PDF. Go check it out. It's only 128 pages, and there's a lot of really great information in there. So yes, thank you everyone for checking us out.
Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
All right, be safe out there.